Hello, I'm Rockport artist John Caggiano. I'm here to conduct one of the interviews in the Meet the Artist series for the Rockport Art Association and Museum. It's in honor of our upcoming centennial anniversary, which honors our long-standing members and looks forward to upcoming generations of artists in all media. Today it's my honor to have with me Tom Nicholas Sr. and Tom Nicholas Jr., better known as TM. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guests.
Thank you.
Hi, fellas.
Thank you.
Tom, I'd like to start off with you. You have a long-time career, obviously. And I'd like to know what kind of got you started in art as a young man.
Well, academically, I wasn't that strong, so, but all the art classes, I did pretty well all through school.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of inspired me to become more professional with it as time went on.
And it was in New York City or here?
No, I was in Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
And that's where the famous artist school is, isn't it?
Yeah, they're in Westport. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved with them?
I took the course, and then I went down to see them because with the course, they give you things to do. And then I had all these paintings, so I went down with the paintings and showed them the paintings. They gave me a job.
One of their successful graduates. Did you find out about them from the proverbial matchbook that they used to advertise on?
No.
Just
No,
knew about
we were living nearby, and I'd drop in a lot, and you know they had Norman Rockwell's stuff in the lobby, and a lot of pretty good artists.
Yes.
You know.
And if you maintained friendships with some of those artists, I take it?
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
And then at what point did you move to Rockport?
Oh boy.
1960.
About
60. Oh,
60.
wow. Long time.
60, yeah.
Did you meet your wife here, or?
No, back
Back
in
in
Connecticut, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after you moved here, you just decided to open a gallery, or you joined the association?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, both.
At the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
So the gallery now would be about 58 to 60 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
My God, how time passes. And so along the way, you've been awarded many great honors. Of course, I'm thinking mostly of National Academy. There are a limited number of members of the National Academy, aren't there?
I suppose there's.
Yes.
I know at one time they before there were any openings, they had to wait for members to die. Then there was an opening, so.
Then the associate
But
members,
I think they expanded that.
I see.
yeah, the associate members would vote for who they thought should be the next academician. And that's when he got in.
It's a great honor. Obviously, there's still a limited number.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other major association, American Watercolor Society.
Yeah.
Will they have signature memberships, or?
Yeah. Yeah, they have full membership for it. Usually if you submit work for their annuals, you know, they'll start to look at you and offer you a membership.
Okay. And TM, you obviously you followed in your father's footsteps. At what point did you realize that you had the fire in the belly for this?
Well, I used to go in to watch him paint, and that's what really got my interest in it. And of course, 90% of his friends were artists as well, so it was a sort of a circle of, constantly being exposed to that sort of life and what went on, with painting and drawing. And so, yeah, so I couldn't wait to get started, really.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, well, it's not obvious, but I take it your father was your first teacher.
Well, we had talked about that. When I was in high school, we talked about taking lessons, and he thought it would be important for me to study with somebody else first. And so at that time, I was on a work-study program where I left my my junior and senior year, and I went to art school right here, above here. John Tarlac had the Gloucester Academy at that time.
Right.
And so I was there for 2 years, and then after that, I spent some time at Montserrat College, but also working with my father.
Mm-hmm. And at Montserrat, with whom did you study?
George Gabin.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And up here at in Browns Mall, I remember the John Tarrack School was around the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You must have met some of our colleagues
Yes.
whom we know today.
Yeah, Mike Karras was up there. He had a studio, and David Beerford, Bob Stevenson, who became one of my good friends. We had a little studio space next to each other. Actually spent a lot of time going down for coffee and these wonderful glazed pastries that they had at the coffee shop down here.
Yeah.
But yeah, Doug Taylor was there, and there was a whole bunch. Dan Green used to come occasionally in the summertime, and
To instruct, or
yeah, he
just
would
to
give
work?
a few demonstrations on the figure. And Harold Walpuff,
Oh, yes.
he was another guy that came, and it was a great environment. John oftentimes would be working on paintings for a show, so he would have a lot of things going, and it was a good experience.
And Tom, during that time, you would visit the TM studio up here, or you
At
just kept
At times, not often.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so in my father's house, he has a upstairs studio and a downstairs studio, and the downstairs one is for watercolor. And at the time when he was teaching me, he would give me watercolor projects to do, which I would do, and then we would talk about the problems. And then he started teaching watercolor workshops in California for Jade Fawn watercolor workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And he was a Chinese-American, self-taught, wonderful watercolor artist. And he would get artists from all over the country, and there'd be 4 of them at the time, with 25 students each. And my father and he became really good friends. And so we would go out almost every year for, 6-7 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great thing, because you had a demonstration, and then you had to make a painting and complete it that day, and it had to be ready for critique at night. And every night you'd get critiques on 100 paintings. And we were there for 2 weeks. So it was intense. It was a lot of work, but it was great,
No pain, no gain, eh?
Yeah.
And so you would spend time out there, and that's how I take it you decided to have gallery representation out there as well, yes?
Yeah. Yeah. He showed with the Fireside Gallery out there. And
Who's Who?
Who's Who Gallery, yeah. I was in the Fireside, he was in Who's Who. Donald Teague was alive at that time, and we used to see him for lunch, he and his wife, and Millard Sheets came down, and then there was the tail end of the California Watercolor School at that time was still around, so they were teaching.
Great company. So there was teamwork between the two of you as well, that you have your separate careers, but came together to collaborate on projects or whatever, shows.
Well, I was young, you know. There was I wasn't in the same category. I was a student, and it took me a long time to work through to be a professional artist. But we enjoyed painting together and going on trips and whatnot. But it wasn't until later I got into my early 20s that I started to have more of a career in art.
Mm-hmm. And at the Rockport Art Association, you must have been pretty active there
Yeah.
all those years.
Yeah.
You probably knew some.
In the early years, I was on their board.
Yes.
And we'd have meetings every 2 weeks or so. So we did that for 3 or 4 years, when we first came into the area.
And the annual meetings at those times were just jam-packed and
Yeah.
Loud.
Interesting.
Loud.
boisterous.
Boisterous. Boisterous, that was the word I was going to use. Yeah.
Interesting.
You and I remember some of those.
Yes, we do. No. On one of these trips out west, by the way, did anything ever happen that would, or to any of your trips, painting trips, anything happen that would stand out to you and as a story
Well,
you like to relate?
We took a trip out west when I had just gotten my license, and it culminated with a show in San Diego, which my father's friend, help me out here, you're not John Calabro, Nick Scalise.
Oh, yes.
So the three of us had a show, and at the time I was just doing watercolors, but we painted across the country, and I helped my mother drive at the time, and eventually we ended up in San Diego, and my father would start and work through and finish paintings on the way as we got there, and that was a great time. It was a special trip. We got to see the whole country and paint in different states and things. It was wonderful.
That's quite a road trip.
Yeah.
It took a while to get out there.
Yeah,
It took about
absolutely.
6 weeks
It
we
took-
were on the road.
Yeah, it took a while to get out there, and we did a lot of painting on the way,
You stay with friends and in hotels and things like this?
Once in a while, we'd run into somebody we knew in the area that we knew from way back, and we'd have lunch with him,
That's great.
Yeah, but it was mostly, a work trip, but at the end of the day, we would play miniature golf or something, I can remember in
Yeah, he used to like to.
Estes Park or something, there was this, here, getting off the subject a little
That's
bit,
okay.
but they have a lot more space out there, so when they have miniature golf, they have and they get these carpet remnants, and they're all patterned in different colors, and they would go like the length of, this tremendous length. You almost needed a driver to hit the ball, but it was quite different than out here. So I remember that as a kid. It was a lot of fun.
That's before the cigar days.
Oh yeah, long before the cigar days.
Oh, so I was looking at the website, and obviously, somewhere along the line, your styles developed. Yours obviously earlier on, but they are quite different. They're both representational, but they, just have diverged. At what point did you feel like you started to have your own identity in style, as opposed to your father's style?
It was a specific time, actually, because at the time we were next to where Strisick had his gallery, and I was just doing watercolors at the time, and somebody came in the gallery and they said, "Oh, you're doing wonderful. Your work's as good as your father's." And of course, I tried to emulate him. I was learning from him, but the comment made me sick because I could see the difference, and it's like they couldn't, you know. So I asked my father about it, and he says, well, no one has a right to paint like me more than you do. He says, but if you find your own way, you'd be happier. And so I set out to try to do that. Where he was interested in soft and hard edges and texture, I tried to get more interested with form and broken color and impressionism and things like that.
Yes.
And he was right. He was usually right.
It was great advice.
Yeah.
And humble advice. We have one of your paintings here now. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
But perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit about it and a bit about your approach to painting, how you begin and then develop the painting.
I think when I painted that, we were painting out together.
Yeah, up in Vermont.
And I just improvised the subject a little further than what I was looking at. It was probably just a couple of hillsides without any buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But I introduced the buildings and made the yellow house the center of interest, and because it was hit by the upper light, then everything else went to a half shadow.
And is that your general approach, that you see a base subject and then you make additions and subtractions?
Oh yeah, I like to mix all kinds of interesting things that aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
Take out the stuff that I don't care for, and
Sure.
you know, add some of the more interesting things to make more of a composition. That's really why you make changes, is composing.
And your palette, it's more subdued, let's say, compared to TM, for instance. It's like a more earthy palette. How would you describe it?
Well, I'm more of a tonal painter
Tonal
than he
painter.
is. He's more of
Yeah.
a colorist.
Yes.
And so being a tonalist, you know, you'd only see, you know, 8 or 10 specific colors in the painting, where he'll have the whole gamut of colors in his paintings.
You have a major exhibit now, a father and son exhibit. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we, at the Cape Ann Museum, and we have, you know, borrowed this work back from private collections, from some of our collectors, you know, over the years. And we've tried to show some of the different things that we do, that we have done in the past. And I think the theme of the show really is about how we've, you know, traveled and painted over the years, many times together, but also sometimes on our own, and seen different things and attempted to try to paint those things. And so, you know, we hope to try to have a lot of variety in the show.
A father and son's journey in paint.
Yes.
It's entitled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Major exhibit. It's wonderful. What advice would you give to other artists who would, you know, want to follow in your footsteps?
Spend if they're young enough and they're just beginning, spend most of the time drawing, and then maybe in a year or two go into painting. But you know, the draftsmanship is crucial.
I've heard this from so many other people. It really is basic,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's crucial.
I think if you're able to draw well, it frees you to tackle more subjects. You know, you have enough confidence in your ability to draw things that you're not frightened to try them. And that would be the advice I would give, is just try things and not be afraid to do things. Years ago, I used to think, you know, if you really worked all the time and you just put your pictures where a lot of people can see them, everything would be okay. And I think for a while it was like that, but it's a little different now. I think you do have to market your stuff, you know, so that people see it, and you know the venues for seeing art have changed, and you have to find out what those are and use them. But there's no substitute and no shortcuts for just working all the time. And really, that's when it sounds. I can remember John Tarlac telling me as a student, you have to cover miles and miles of canvas. And at that time when I'm painting, you know, everything is so precious, you know, and I'm really just, you know, and it took me so long to do anything. And the thought of covering miles of canvas just made me tired and depressed, you know. But after a while, what he didn't tell me was you look forward to it. You can't wait to cover more canvas. You know?
A little easier for him. He was a two-fisted
Yeah, right.
painter. He's so fast. So along the advertising or business end of it, you talk about online,
Yeah.
and in the magazines.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever you can do to get your work in front of people.
Exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. I don't do all of it. I probably will at some point, but I think it's important. And you know, the whole computer thing turned me off for many years. I just didn't bother with it. It's just not in my nature, you know. Technical stuff, but
now you're doing it.
well, yeah, and it's actually fun for me to see, you know, my artist friends' work that comes up, and I can see what they're doing. 'Cause, you know, everybody's real busy. We don't always have time to get together, so you can see at least what they're doing, where they are, and painting, and that's nice.
And then it's important to show in venues like Rockport Art Association.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
in the North Shore Art
North.
Association.
Had to get them out of the studio.
Mhm.
Right.
Get them the hell out.
Win those awards, which both of you have won tons of them. I'll use that term, but a great number because of the quality of your work.
Yeah,
That's great.
we've been lucky.
Yeah, we've been lucky.
You would call it luck. I'd like to see one of your paintings since we've been speaking about it. So why don't we pause and we'll put another painting up. Welcome back. By the way, I'd like to just explain one thing. There were so many names of artists named here, mentioned. We knew so many of them, and there are a myriad of stories that can be told. Not enough time, certainly in these broadcasts. Hopefully one day we'll be able to do that for you. And it would be great for you to research it yourself. Now we have one of the paintings that TM has brought in. It's one of his, and so we'll speak of that for a little bit. TM. Obviously, much different style than your dad's. He had mentioned about your color palette. Well, why don't you speak about it? I don't want to explain.
Yeah, well, I share some of my father's teachings, and that is, you know, the composition and editing nature to suit your needs. I believe in that, and you know, I think it took me a long time before I felt confident to make changes to nature, but I think what it does is it personalizes your work, and it prioritizes things in the painting, which is important. It's something that I've retained from his teaching all my life. But this type of picture, I painted it on the spot. I started it on the spot, and then when I got home, I began to edit it a little bit and consolidate pieces so that it read well. And that's typically how I work these days. I like to start things outside. I make a lot of mistakes. I bring it inside. I fix the mistakes. I try to. You see, when you're outside, you're looking and doing, and you're not thinking perhaps, or I'm not thinking perhaps as much as I should. And so, in the studio, without the subject there, I can just see, what the possibilities are for the painting, and what could happen with that. If I had ideas that were germinating on the spot, I'm able to do that in the studio, or force that upon the subject in the studio.
So you're away from the confining references that you're seeing on location.
Yeah, I mean, this picture in particular, I can remember for 2 weeks I went out with a friend of mine and we painted seascapes. And I think we were out there every day. And this was at the end of 2 weeks. It was the better one that I had done. I had one other one that I ended up keeping, and the rest of the time it was a disaster.
Scrapers.
Yeah. Well, you have the sea coming in, and
It's good to know. Most people think that all the great painters don't have any dogs in the closet. So I don't wish it on you, but it's wonderful to hear that you have scrapers as well.
I can remember my father, because I used to scrape things out routinely, and he would always say, "Bring it home first, and then look at it. And if you still don't like it, then scrape it out." And that's good advice, because you can't always see everything accurately when you're outside, in front of the subject, and you're hoping for more, and it just isn't there. But maybe there's something else, So if you bring it back home, and then you look at it, and you might occasionally, maybe you
For
would.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your surfaces are more textural?
Well, I like to get enough paint on the painting. I like to play around with the sculptural quality of the paint, and I'm not as thick as some artists, but I do like to get a nice thickness to the paint. I just think it enriches the surface, and it activates the surface too.
And you start off with just a brief sketch?
I start off generally with big abstract forms, and I keep the paint thin, and I draw into that. I try to get the light going immediately, oftentimes with color washes and things. And then if I'm sure of things, then I start applying thicker paint.
I see.
But I like to be sure, because oftentimes if you don't know what you're going to do, and you start getting real thick, it gets to be a mess real quick.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
At least in my case.
And this is one of your Marines. Is it one of your favorite subjects, or do you have a preference?
Well, I do love them. I painted quite a few of them years ago, and then I got away from it for a long time, and I revisit it every now and then. I'll go down and try to get something going. But it's the kind of thing, Marines are, at least for me, they're tough. I mean, it's a moving subject, and you have to almost be in shape for it, like an athlete, where you're doing it all the time. And so if you have an extra week or two to spend just doing that, and you actually have some turbulence in the water, it's a great thing to do. It's very difficult, very difficult.
Right.
But most things that are worth doing are.
Yes, absolutely. I'd just like to touch on a couple of short subjects. You were president of the Rockport Art Association.
Yes.
And did a great job.
As were you.
Thank you. So, what do you two see as, let's say, the future of the Rockport Art Association at this point in time?
Well, all things change a little bit as we move into the future, especially in concerned with art. Although I think the future is bright for the association. There's a lot of good people involved, and the art is diverse. And we've got all different types of artists in there now, and as we had in the past, maybe a little more so now. But I think the museum collection is growing, and we hope it's someday to have a designated space for that. So I think things look good.
And recently, the association had a national show,
Mm-hmm.
which you were an intricate part of in organizing.
Well, it's not a new idea. It wasn't my idea to begin with. Others have had that idea, and I think we even did it one time years ago. But I think it's something we'll be doing every year, and we have a tremendous group of other artists and people on that group that help see that through.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank both of you for coming today and sharing your lives with us. It was really my honor to be the interviewer.
Thank you,
so,
John.
we hope to see you next time, and look forward to continuing the series. Thank you very much.